As the golden hues of sunset bathed New York City, Jack Morgan's life seemed to shimmer with success and opulence. At 30, he had it all: wealth, a sprawling penthouse, and a world of luxury at his fingertips. Yet, despite the grandeur of his surroundings and the endless parties, Jack's heart was heavy with an unshakable loneliness. His every achievement felt hollow, leaving him yearning for something deeper. One evening, driven by a need to escape his isolated existence, Jack drove through the city streets until a chance encounter with a homeless woman and her daughter changed everything. Moved by their dignity and resilience, Jack offered them not just money but an opportunity to work in his mansion. This gesture marked the beginning of a profound transformation. Sarah and Emily brought new energy into Jack's life, with Sarah's artistic talents and Emily's culinary skills rekindling a sense of purpose and joy in Jack. As their bond grew stronger, Jack found himself learning more about art, life, and human connection than he ever had in his corporate world. However, this newfound contentment was soon overshadowed by a dark secret from Sarah's past. The arrival of Richard Baker, a renowned art dealer with a hidden agenda, revealed that Sarah's past was far more entangled with Jack's present than he could have ever imagined. As Sarah and Emily struggled with their fears and secrets, Jack was faced with the harsh reality of their intertwined fates. Join us as we dive into this emotional journey from wealth and loneliness to discovery and revelation. Witness how a chance encounter can alter lives in ways beyond our wildest dreams, and uncover the secrets that threaten to unravel everything. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Before we dive into this story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its final, golden rays over the sprawling canvas of New York City, the sky transformed into a mesmerizing tapestry of fiery oranges and soft pinks. These vibrant hues danced across the massive windows of Jack Morgan's opulent penthouse, painting a picture of both splendor and solitude. At just 30 years old, Jack found himself at the helm of a colossal business empire, a fortune that spanned the realms of cutting-edge technology and lucrative real estate. This wealth had been thrust upon him following the heart-wrenching loss of his parents in a tragic plane crash a decade prior. Now, from his towering perch above the city, he gazed out with a melancholic sense of detachment, his hand clutching a glass of whiskey as if it might somehow fill the void within. Despite his vast riches and the dazzling array of luxuries at his disposal, including lavish parties, globe-trotting adventures, and a parade of admirers, Jack was engulfed by a profound sense of loneliness, an emptiness that no amount of wealth or superficial glamour could seem to dispel. His introspection was abruptly interrupted by the soft yet insistent voice of his loyal butler, Alfred, who gently pulled him from his reverie. "Dinner is served," Alfred announced, his tone imbued with the quiet dignity that had been a constant in Jack's life since the death of his parents. Without turning to acknowledge him, Jack gave a nod and took a final, contemplative sip of his drink before making his way to the dining room. The immense mahogany table, designed to accommodate 20 guests, stood starkly against the grandeur of the room, now set with only a solitary plate at its far end. The silence of the mansion seemed to amplify the solitary echo of his footsteps as he seated himself. Alfred, whose role had transcended that of mere servant to become a trusted family confidant, inquired softly, "Would you like me to stay with you during dinner, sir?" Jack's response was curt yet polite. "That won't be necessary, Alfred. You may retire." With a respectful bow, Alfred departed, leaving Jack alone amidst a plate of gourmet delicacies that he would scarcely touch. As Jack poked at his meal, his appetite long gone, he recalled his father's oft-repeated wisdom. "Money doesn't buy happiness, son. It's the connections we forge with others that truly matter." These words struck a chord with unprecedented intensity. Surrounded by opulence, Jack was acutely aware of his profound isolation. Unable to bear the emptiness any longer, he abruptly rose from the table, grabbed his car keys, and left the mansion in silence. Yearning for something beyond the confines of his gilded cage, he sought solace in the cool night air. The streets of New York City greeted him with their familiar nocturnal vibrancy. Jack drove aimlessly, the powerful roar of his sports car's engine providing a temporary escape from his turbulent thoughts. It was at a red light that a sight in the corner caught his eye. There, bathed in the dim, melancholic glow of a street lamp, sat an older woman on the cold pavement. Beside her, a young woman, no older than 20, held a sign that pleaded, "We need help. Anything is welcome." The scene struck a deep chord within Jack, stirring feelings he hadn't experienced in years. Perhaps it was the dignified composure of the older woman despite her plight or the unwavering resolve in the young woman's gaze. Without a moment's hesitation, Jack parked his car and approached them. "Good evening," he said, his voice carrying a sincerity he hadn't felt in a long time. "I'd like to offer my assistance." The older woman regarded him with a blend of gratitude and pride, her eyes reflecting a quiet dignity. "Thank you, young man, but we don't seek charity. If you have any work available." Jack was momentarily taken aback. The idea of his money being rejected was foreign to him. But then, a thought occurred to him. "Actually," he began, "I need someone to help around my house. It's a large mansion, and there's always something that needs attention. Would you be interested?" The young woman glanced at her mother, who seemed to deliberate over the offer. "My name is Sarah," the older woman finally said, "and this is my daughter, Emily. Are you certain you wish to offer us work without knowing us?" For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Jack's lips curved into a genuine smile. "Sometimes you have to follow your instincts," he replied warmly. "I'm Jack Morgan. Will you accept my offer?" After a brief pause, Sarah nodded with a mixture of relief and hope. "We accept, Mr. Morgan. Thank you for this opportunity." That fateful night, as Jack drove Sarah and Emily toward his grand estate, he couldn't fathom the profound impact this serendipitous meeting would soon have on his life. The days that followed at the Morgan mansion were a whirlwind of transformation and discovery. Jack had allocated the expansive basement to Sarah and Emily, ensuring it was equipped with every conceivable comfort. Sarah, despite her years, emerged as a relentless force of diligence. Her unwavering commitment to tidying and organizing every nook and cranny of the massive house was a revelation to everyone, including Alfred, who had initially regarded the newcomers with a wary eye. Emily, initially reserved, soon took to the kitchen with a natural flair for culinary arts that left Jack genuinely impressed. One afternoon, as Jack worked in his study, he was unexpectedly drawn to a melody drifting up from the basement. Curiosity piqued. He descended the stairs and was greeted by a sight that took his breath away. Sarah was seated before an old easel she had unearthed from the attic, painting with a focus and skill that spoke volumes of a long-abandoned talent. "Sarah," Jack said, his voice tinged with surprise. "I had no idea you were a painter." Startled, Sarah looked up as if caught in a moment of trespass. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan. I found these old materials and couldn't resist. It's been years since I last held a brush." Jack moved closer to inspect the painting. It depicted a vibrant urban landscape of New York City, but there was a magical quality in how Sarah had rendered the light and shadows, breathing life into the canvas. "This is extraordinary," Jack murmured. "Where did you learn to paint like this?" Sarah's eyes dropped, revealing a shadow of past pain. "I studied at the National Academy of Fine Arts many years ago. I even had a few exhibitions, but that was a lifetime ago." Jack, sensing the depth of her unspoken sorrow, pressed gently. "What happened? Why did you stop?" For a moment, Sarah was enveloped in silence, her eyes drifting back to forgotten times. "Life happened, Mr. Morgan. Life has a way of steering us onto paths we never imagined." Jack nodded in understanding, respecting her reticence. Yet an idea began to take shape in his mind. "Sarah, would you like to paint again? I could provide you with new materials and convert this space into a studio." A glimmer of hope briefly illuminated Sarah's eyes, only to be quickly overshadowed by doubt. "I couldn't accept such generosity, Mr. Morgan. You've already done more than enough for us." "Please call me Jack," he insisted warmly. "And don't view it as charity. Consider it an investment. Your art could be very valuable. I know people in the art world who would be very interested. Sarah hesitated, her thoughts racing. Finally, a tentative smile graced her lips. All right, Jack. I'll accept your offer, but with one condition. Anything, Jack responded eagerly. I want you to paint with me, Sarah said with a glint of mischief. I think you could use a touch of art in your life. Jack chuckled, surprised by the suggestion. Sarah, it's been ages since I touched a brush, back in elementary school. It's never too late to learn, Sarah countered with a knowing smile. Deal, Jack said, extending his hand to seal the agreement. That evening, as Jack shared a meal with Sarah and Emily, a new routine that would soon become a cherished tradition, he felt an unfamiliar yet invigorating sense of change. For the first time in years, he experienced a flicker of excitement and purpose that transcended his financial success. Little did he realize this was only the beginning. Fate had intricately woven their lives together in ways none could have predicted, and the secrets hidden within Sarah's heart were poised to unfold, altering the course of their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. Meanwhile, within the opulent confines of the mansion, in the heart of the city, where the neon lights cast long shadows over the bustling streets, a middle-aged man surveyed the urban landscape with a chilling detachment. Richard Baker, a prominent figure in the art world and the respected owner of a renowned gallery, concealed a sinister secret beneath his veneer of success and sophistication. Without turning, he inquired in a tone that betrayed no emotion. Have you uncovered anything of significance? The private investigator, who had been diligently hunting for clues for months, replied with a hint of frustration. Nothing concrete, sir. However, there are whispers of a rising artist making waves in the underground scene. They say her style bears a striking resemblance to someone familiar. Richard's demeanor shifted subtly, a flicker of tension evident in his rigid posture. Familiar in what way? In a manner akin to Sarah Thompson, the investigator answered, his words hanging heavily in the air. The mention of the name caused Richard to spin around sharply, his eyes blazing with a volatile mix of rage and yearning. Find her, he commanded, his voice sharp and resolute. No matter the cost, track her down. As the investigator exited, Richard's gaze returned to the sprawling cityscape before him. His thoughts raced between the shadows of his past, memories he believed were buried, and a future that loomed with the ominous threat of exposure. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Meanwhile, within the serene confines of the Morgan mansion, unaware of the gathering storm, Jack, Sarah, and Emily were forging connections that would soon be tested in unforeseen ways. The passing days melded into weeks, and weeks into months, transforming the once-neglected basement into a vibrant art studio where Sarah and Jack spent countless hours together. The basement, once a cluttered repository of forgotten relics, had evolved into a sanctuary of creativity. Here, Sarah poured her heart into her work, and Jack, initially a novice, discovered a latent aptitude for painting he had never suspected. Under Sarah's patient and encouraging guidance, his initially hesitant strokes developed into confident, expressive lines. But more than mastering technique, Jack was unearthing a profound new perspective on life. Art transcends mere replication of the visible world, Sarah explained one afternoon, her voice imbued with passion as they worked side by side. It's about capturing the essence, the emotion that resides beneath the surface. Jack, engrossed in the lesson, responded thoughtfully, It's as if you're teaching me to see anew. Sarah's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. Precisely. When you learn to see in this way, you discover beauty in places you'd never imagine. Jack felt these words resonate deeply within him. For years, his vision had been clouded by a singular focus on financial success and the legacy of his parents' empire. Thanks to Sarah's influence, he was beginning to see the world with fresh eyes. Emily, on the other hand, had flourished in the mansion's kitchen, her culinary skills blossoming into something extraordinary. Jack soon found himself eagerly anticipating each meal, marveling at Emily's talent for blending flavors into dishes that were as visually stunning as they were delectable. One evening, as he savored another of Emily's culinary masterpieces, Jack's curiosity got the better of him. "Emily, where did you learn to cook with such finesse?" Blushing under the praise, Emily answered modestly, "I taught myself. During our time on the streets, I had to make do with what little we had. I suppose I developed an instinct for creating interesting flavor combinations." Sarah gazed at her daughter with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Emily has always shown incredible resilience. Even in our darkest moments, she managed to bring a touch of comfort and joy. As they continued to share their lives, the bonds among them deepened, unknowingly setting the stage for trials and revelations that would forever alter their paths. Jack felt a deep pang of guilt as he reflected on his problems, which now seemed trivial and insignificant compared to the challenges faced by Sarah and Emily. "You two are truly remarkable," he said with heartfelt sincerity. "In these few months, you've taught me more than I ever learned in years of business school." Sarah's face lit up with a warm, grateful smile. "And you've given us a chance we never thought we'd have. Words can't express how thankful we are." Jack shook his head, his expression softening. "There's no need to thank me. It's you who have breathed life back into this house. For the first time in years, I feel like I have a home, not just a mansion full of empty rooms." Their intimate moment of connection was abruptly interrupted by Alfred, who entered the dining room with a look of concern. "I apologize for the interruption, Mr. Morgan, but there's an urgent call for you in your study." "It's Mr. Baker." Jack's brow furrowed at the mention of Richard Baker, a renowned art dealer with whom he had previously interacted, mainly in connection with the art collection inherited from his parents. It was unusual for Baker to call at such a late hour. "Excuse me," Jack said, rising from the table. "I'll be right back." As Jack made his way to his study, he missed the subtle yet telling signs of distress on Sarah's face. Her eyes widened slightly, and her complexion paled as soon as she heard Baker's name. In the study, Jack answered the call. "Baker, what a surprise," Jack said, attempting to mask his unease. "What can I do for you?" Richard Baker's voice was smooth and insistent, carrying a subtle undercurrent of manipulation. "Jack, my dear friend, I apologize for calling so late, but I have a proposal that I believe you'll find irresistible." Jack listened intently as Baker outlined an exclusive exhibition he was organizing, highlighting emerging artists with distinctive and compelling styles. "And this is where you come into the picture," Baker continued, his tone oozing with calculated charm. "I've heard whispers that you've been dabbling in art recently. I'd be thrilled to see your work, and who knows, it might even find a place in the exhibition." For a moment, Jack was taken aback, his mind racing. The thought of showcasing his paintings publicly had never crossed his mind. I'm not sure what to say, Richard. I'm still learning. I don't think my work is ready for an exhibition." Baker's voice took on a tone of firm assurance. "Nonsense, Jack. Leave the judgment to me. How about I visit your mansion tomorrow to discuss this in person?" Before Jack could reply, Baker had already ended the call with a swift farewell. "Perfect. I'll see you tomorrow at 11. Good night, Jack." The conversation left Jack feeling a complex mix of excitement and apprehension. He returned to the dining room to find Sarah and Emily clearing the table. "Everything okay?" Sarah inquired, her attempt to conceal her worry evident in her strained tone. Jack, still processing the unexpected news, nodded. "Yes, it was Richard Baker. He wants to see my paintings. He's coming over tomorrow." As the words left his mouth, Sarah dropped the plate she was holding. It crashed to the floor, shards scattering across the room. "I'm so sorry," she muttered, quickly bending down to gather the broken pieces. "Don't worry about it," Jack said, moving to assist. He noticed Sarah's hands were trembling slightly. "Are you all right? You look a bit pale." Sarah forced a smile, her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. "I'm fine, just a bit tired. I think I'll head to bed early tonight." Jack watched her leave, feeling a nagging concern. The unfolding events hinted at deeper, hidden layers he was yet to uncover, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's reaction was only the beginning of a much larger, more complex revelation. As Sarah hurriedly retreated from the dining room, Jack's unease grew. Something about her reaction didn't sit right with him. He turned to Emily, hoping to get some insight, but the young woman's puzzled expression mirrored his confusion. "Emily, do you know if your mother has any connection to Richard Baker?" Jack asked, trying to piece together the puzzle. Emily shook her head. "Not that I know of. Mom's past is a bit of a mystery. She doesn't talk much about it." That night, while the house was enveloped in silence, Sarah crept back down to the basement studio. Her hands trembled as she worked, carefully covering her paintings with cloths. Tears traced silent paths down her cheeks as she whispered to herself, "I can't let him find me, not after everything we've been through." The next morning, Jack awoke early, his nerves frayed by the impending visit from Baker. He made his way to the studio to prepare his paintings, only to find Sarah already there, her exhaustion evident in the dark circles beneath her eyes. "Sarah, what are you doing up so early?" Jack asked, noticing her frantic activity. Sarah looked up, startled by his presence. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect for your visit," she said, avoiding his gaze. Jack noticed that some of Sarah's paintings had been covered or moved. "Why are these works covered? They're stunning. I'm sure Baker would appreciate them." Sarah shook her head vehemently. "No, please, let's not show them. This is your moment, Jack. You should focus on your work." Jack was about to press the issue when the sound of the doorbell interrupted them. Baker had arrived. Sarah quickly excused herself, saying she needed to help Emily in the kitchen. Jack watched her leave, a mix of confusion and concern clouding his thoughts. Richard Baker strode into the studio, exuding the air of someone who navigated the upper echelons of the art world with ease. Dressed impeccably, his sharp eyes surveyed everything around him with a discerning gaze. "Jack, my dear friend," Baker greeted with a practiced warmth. "What a pleasure to see you again. I see you've been quite productive." As Baker perused Jack's paintings, his gaze frequently darted to the covered works in the corner of the studio. "Fascinating," he murmured. "You certainly have a gift. But tell me, what's hidden beneath those sheets?" "More of your work." Jack hesitated, glancing at the covered paintings. "No, those belong to a friend. She prefers to keep them private for now." Baker's eyes glinted with an intensity that suggested his interest went beyond mere appreciation. "A friend, you say? How intriguing. Are you certain I can't have a look?" Before Jack could respond, the studio door swung open, and Emily entered with a tray of coffee and pastries. "Excuse the interruption," she said, her shyness evident. "I thought you might like some refreshments." Baker's attention momentarily shifted to the young woman, but his curiosity about the hidden artworks lingered in his expression. As Emily set down the tray, Baker's gaze returned to Jack, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "Well, Jack, your work is certainly impressive, but if you ever decide to share more, do let me know." Jack nodded, trying to mask his growing discomfort. "Thank you, Richard. I appreciate the interest." As Baker continued to explore the studio, Jack's thoughts raced. Sarah's secrecy and Baker's keen interest in the covered paintings hinted at deeper, hidden truths. The day's events were unraveling in ways he hadn't anticipated, and Jack was beginning to realize that the tangled threads of their lives were about to intersect in unforeseen ways. As Sarah's voice trembled with the weight of her confession, the gravity of her words seemed to hang heavily in the kitchen air. Jack and Emily listened intently, their shock mirrored in their expressions. "At first," Sarah continued, her eyes reflecting a mix of regret and resolve, "I tried to play along, hoping I could find a way out without causing too much damage. But Richard's influence was far-reaching, and I soon realized I was trapped. The threats against me were real, and he made it clear that my only option was to disappear." Emily's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. "So, you left New York and moved here to escape him?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, Emily and I went into hiding. We left everything behind, including my career. I hoped that by distancing myself from Richard and his network, I could protect us both. I tried to rebuild our lives here, away from the shadows of the past." Jack's mind raced, trying to reconcile the charming and successful art dealer he knew with the dark figure Sarah was describing. So Baker is still involved in that world? Sarah's face hardened. He is. And now that he's found me, I fear he may have ulterior motives. I never wanted you to be dragged into this, Jack. I hope to keep my past buried and build a new life away from Richard's reach. Jack's frustration and concern grew. But why did you cover your paintings? What does that have to do with Baker's interest? Sarah sighed deeply. Richard's interest in art is more than just professional. If he recognizes my old style, he might see it as a threat or an opportunity. My paintings from that period could expose him if they were linked back to his forgery operations. Covering them was my way of protecting both myself and anyone who might become involved. Emily, who had been silent, finally spoke up. And what happens now? What if he comes back? Sarah's eyes were filled with a mix of fear and determination. I don't know, Emily, but we can't let him control our lives any longer. We need to be cautious and prepared. I've spent years running and hiding, and I'm tired of it. Jack's expression softened as he reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on Sarah's. We'll face this together. If Baker wants to come after you, he'll have to go through me first. Sarah's eyes welled with tears of relief. Thank you, Jack. I didn't expect this level of support. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. Jack shook his head. We all have pasts and secrets. What matters now is how we handle them. We'll need to be smart about this. Keep a low profile and stay vigilant. But we'll get through it. Together. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 2 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Emily nodded in agreement, her expression resolute. We'll face whatever comes next as a family. We've already started something new here, and we won't let anyone tear that apart. The kitchen, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now resonated with a newfound sense of unity and resolve. The afternoon sun continued to cast its warm light through the windows, symbolizing the hope and strength that would guide them through the challenges ahead. As they sat together, ready to confront the shadows of the past, they knew that their bond was stronger than any threat that could come their way. The kitchen was engulfed in a heavy silence as Sarah and Emily absorbed the gravity of the revelations that had just been shared. The sun continued to cast its warm light through the windows, but it felt distant, unable to penetrate the darkness that now enveloped their lives. Sarah wiped her tears, trying to steady her breathing. Emily, who had been silent, looked at her mother with a mix of hurt and confusion. Mom, we need to figure out what to do next. Jack's right, we have to address this head-on. Sarah nodded, her face etched with deep lines of worry and regret. I know. I just hope Jack can find it in his heart to understand why I did what I did. Emily moved closer to her mother, offering a comforting embrace. We've been through so much. It's not going to be easy, but we have to face this together. In the moments that followed, Sarah and Emily sat in quiet contemplation, each lost in their thoughts. The once familiar kitchen now felt foreign, a place marked by the shattering of long-held beliefs and secrets. Jack, meanwhile, retreated to his study, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. The news that Sarah was his biological mother, combined with the horrifying truth about Richard Baker's possible involvement in the plane crash, left him grappling with an overwhelming sense of betrayal and confusion. He needed space to process everything, the weight of his new identity, the implications for his past, and the looming threat that Richard Baker posed. He paced the room, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The Morgans had been his family in every sense of the word. They had given him a life of privilege and love, and now, to learn that his real mother had been living in the shadows, hiding from a dangerous man, was almost too much to bear. The realization that his adoptive parents might have been murdered to keep the truth from him only deepened his turmoil. As he reached for a glass of water, his hand trembled. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden ringing of his phone. Jack picked it up, hoping for a distraction from the painful revelations. Hello? He answered, trying to steady his voice. Jack, it's Richard Baker, came the smooth, calculated voice on the other end. I hope you don't mind my calling so soon after our meeting. I just wanted to follow up and see if you've had any thoughts about my offer. Jack's heart sank. The last thing he wanted was to deal with Baker at this moment. Yes, Richard. I've been thinking. I need to speak with you in person. There are some things we need to discuss. Of course, Baker responded, his tone indicating he was pleased by the invitation. I'm available anytime. Just let me know when and where. Jack felt a surge of determination. How about tomorrow afternoon? Let's meet at a cafe downtown. It'll be more private. Sounds perfect, Baker agreed. I'll see you then. As he ended the call, Jack took a deep breath. Meeting Baker would give him a chance to confront him directly and possibly uncover more about what had happened. It was a step towards reclaiming control over the situation and perhaps finding answers to the many questions that plagued him. Returning to the kitchen, Jack found Sarah and Emily still seated, their expressions solemn but resolute. I've arranged to meet with Baker tomorrow, he said. I need to get to the bottom of this. I hope you two are ready for whatever comes next. Sarah and Emily nodded in agreement. We'll face it together, Sarah said, and we'll do everything we can to keep ourselves safe. With a sense of grim determination, the three of them prepared to confront the dark shadows of their past. The future remained uncertain, but they were united by a newfound strength and resolve. The challenges ahead would be formidable, but as a family, they were ready to face them, one step at a time. The kitchen's atmosphere thickened with tension as Sarah's words sank in. Jack's face, already pale from the shock of his newfound family history, grew even paler. Emily's eyes widened in fear and disbelief. The warmth of the kitchen, usually a source of comfort, now felt oppressive and suffocating. Jack stepped forward, his expression a mixture of determination and concern. Sarah, we need to figure out a plan. We can't just give in to him. There has to be another way. Sarah shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. You don't understand. Richard is dangerous. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. I can't put either of you in harm's way. Emily, her voice trembling but resolute, added, Mom, we're in this together. We need to find a way to protect ourselves and stop Richard once and for all. We can't just let him control our lives. Jack looked at Emily, then back at Sarah, his mind racing. We need to go to the authorities. They can help us handle this. Sarah hesitated. I tried to go to the police years ago, but Richard's influence was too strong. I don't know if they can help now either. Jack's eyes narrowed with resolve. Things have changed. We need to try. Maybe with all of us together, we can convince them to take action. Emily nodded in agreement. And we should also think about what we can do to protect ourselves. We need to be prepared for anything. Sarah's heart ached at the thought of involving her children in this nightmare. But seeing their determination and unity gave her a glimmer of hope. All right, we'll go to the police. And in the meantime, we need to make sure we're safe. Jack took out his phone and dialed the local police department. As he spoke with the officer on the other end, he glanced at Sarah and Emily, trying to reassure them with his calm demeanor despite the anxiety gnawing at him. Hello? I'd like to report a threat, Jack said firmly. My family and I are in immediate danger, and we need protection. As Jack outlined the situation, Sarah and Emily prepared to gather any evidence they had against Richard. Sarah retrieved the remaining paintings that had not been covered and packed them carefully, knowing they would need to present them as part of the case. Emily helped, her hands shaking as she worked. When Jack finished his call, he looked at Sarah and Emily with a determined expression. The police are on their way. They'll take our statement and start investigating. In the meantime, we need to stay alert and keep our plans flexible. Richard is unpredictable. Sarah, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension, nodded. Thank you, Jack. I'm sorry for everything. I wish I could undo the past. Jack placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. We'll face this together. We have to. The three of them waited in tense silence for the authorities to arrive, the weight of the situation heavy on their shoulders. As the minutes ticked by, they prepared themselves for the next phase of their battle against the shadows of their past. They were no longer just individuals caught in a web of deceit. They were a family united by a common enemy, ready to fight for their safety and their future. The idea hung in the air, a dangerous but potentially effective solution to their predicament. Jack's proposal sparked a flicker of determination in Sarah and Emily, who had been grappling with a mixture of fear and resolve. Sarah looked at Jack with renewed hope. "How do you propose we set this trap?" Jack began to outline his plan. "We'll need to be meticulous. First, we need to ensure the paintings are safe and secure, away from Richard's reach. I suggest we enlist the help of the authorities to monitor any attempts to access them." Emily, her anxiety tempered by a sense of purpose, added, "And we should set up a decoy. If we make Richard believe he's getting the originals, he might expose himself when he comes for them." Sarah's eyes met Jack's, gratitude and admiration evident. "I trust you, Jack. Let's make sure this plan is airtight. We need to anticipate every move Richard might make." With a determined nod, Jack set about coordinating the plan. He contacted the police, sharing the details of their strategy and ensuring that undercover officers would be in place to catch Richard in the act. Meanwhile, Sarah and Emily worked to prepare the paintings. They carefully moved the originals to a secure location while creating convincing replicas to serve as decoys. Alfred, always the steadfast ally, offered to help by providing logistical support and ensuring that the studio remained discreetly under surveillance. The weight of their plan made the atmosphere in the mansion charged with anticipation. Each of them had a role to play, and they executed their tasks with precision, knowing that their lives depended on the success of this operation. As the days passed, the tension in the Morgan mansion grew palpable. The storm that had brewed in the skies outside seemed to mirror the storm within, as Jack, Sarah, and Emily prepared for the confrontation with Richard. They maintained a constant vigil, checking and rechecking every detail of their plan. Then the day arrived. The studio was set, the paintings displayed in a way that would entice Richard to take the bait. The police were stationed in covert positions, ready to intervene at the crucial moment. Jack, Sarah, and Emily waited anxiously, their hearts pounding as the hours ticked by. They could only hope that their plan would work and that Richard would fall into their trap. The tension was nearly unbearable as the day wore on, with each creak of the mansion's old wooden floors and each gust of wind outside seeming to heighten their sense of suspense. Finally, as the sun began to set, a familiar figure emerged in the shadows. Richard Baker, looking as menacing as ever, approached the studio. The moment had arrived. Jack, Sarah, and Emily watched from their hidden vantage points, their breaths held as Richard moved closer to the decoy paintings. Richard's eyes narrowed as he examined the replicas. His greed and impatience were palpable, and he began to make his move. The police, hidden but alert, were poised to act. Just as Richard was about to make a critical mistake, the signal was given. Undercover officers swiftly moved in, surrounding him and ensuring that he had no escape. The confrontation was swift and decisive, and Richard Baker, finally caught in the web of his deceit, was taken into custody. The tension in the studio dissolved into a mixture of relief and triumph. Jack, Sarah, and Emily emerged from their hiding places, their faces reflecting the exhaustion and elation of their victory. They had faced their darkest fears and emerged stronger, their bond as a family forged in the crucible of their shared struggle. In the aftermath of Richard's capture, the Morgan mansion began to return to a semblance of normalcy. The original paintings were safely recovered and returned to Sarah, who felt a profound sense of closure. The shadow of Richard Baker had been lifted, and the future seemed brighter for Jack, Sarah, and Emily. As they gathered together in the studio, surrounded by the artwork that had been both a symbol of their past and a beacon of their future, they looked at each other with newfound understanding and appreciation. They had faced the storm and emerged not just as a family but as a united front, ready to embrace the next chapter of their lives with hope and resilience. The weight of their plan hung heavily in the air, but there was a newfound sense of unity among them. Jack, Sarah, and Emily were ready to face the next phase of their struggle together, each step bringing them closer to overcoming the threat that had loomed over their lives for so long. Sarah dialed the number, her fingers trembling slightly. The line rang a few times before it was answered. A familiar voice, deep and warm, came through the speaker. "Hello, Matthew?" Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "It's Sarah. It's been a long time." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. "Sarah? Is this you?" "Yes, it's me," she said, her voice steadying. "I know it's been years, but I need your help. Richard Baker is back, and he's threatening my family. We're in danger." Matthew's voice softened, filled with concern. "What's happened? Are you safe?" "We're safe for now," Sarah said, "but we need your expertise. Richard plans to auction forgeries of my work, and we need to catch him in the act. I'm organizing a private exhibition to lure him in, but I need your knowledge to ensure everything goes smoothly." If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 3 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. "I see," Matthew replied, his tone thoughtful. "I'm willing to help. I'll need to see the paintings and understand the situation fully before we proceed." "We'll arrange everything," Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. "We're at the Morgan mansion. Can you come over as soon as possible?" "I'll be there," Matthew assured her. "I'll bring my equipment and do what I can to assist." As the call ended, Sarah turned to Jack and Emily, a mixture of hope and anxiety on her face. "Matthew is on his way. He'll help us with the paintings and make sure everything is set for the exhibition." Jack gave a reassuring smile. "Good. We'll have everything prepared by the time he arrives." The next few hours were a flurry of activity as Jack, Emily, and Sarah worked diligently to finalize the preparations. They set up the studio for the exhibition, ensuring the decoy paintings were displayed in a way that would attract Richard's attention. Matthew arrived with his tools and immediately began examining the originals, checking their condition and preparing them for their role in the plan. As Matthew worked, he and Sarah shared a quiet, emotional conversation, catching up on years of separation and loss. Jack and Emily kept busy, making sure every detail was accounted for and that their roles in the plan were clear. Finally, the day of the exhibition arrived. The studio was transformed into an elegant space, showcasing the art in a way that would entice potential buyers. The decoy paintings were displayed prominently, while the originals were kept secure, ready to be revealed at the right moment. Jack, Sarah, and Emily stood together, ready to face whatever came next. The tension was palpable as they waited for Richard to make his move. They had done everything they could to prepare, and now it was time to see if their plan would succeed. As the first guests began to arrive, the atmosphere in the studio was one of anticipation and hope. Jack glanced at Sarah and Emily, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This was their chance to not only protect their family, but also to reclaim their lives from the shadow of Richard Baker's deceit. The door creaked open, and Richard stepped into the studio, his eyes scanning the room with a predatory gleam. He was greeted by the sight of the elegant setup and the array of paintings, each one meticulously placed to draw his interest. Jack, Sarah, and Emily watched from their positions, their hearts racing as they prepared for the confrontation. The moment of truth had arrived, and they could only hope that their plan would unfold as intended, leading to Richard's downfall and a new beginning for their family. Emily looked up from the stove, her face lit with a weary but determined smile. "Morning, Jack. You're up early." Jack nodded, rubbing his eyes. "I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about meeting Matthew today. It's overwhelming." Emily poured him a cup of coffee and handed it to him. "I can imagine. It's a lot to take in. But remember, we're doing this together. We have a plan, and we've got each other." Jack took a sip, feeling the warmth spread through him. "Thanks, Emily. Your support means everything." As they sat at the kitchen table, they discussed last-minute details of the private exhibition. Emily had arranged for a caterer and ensured that every element of the event would appear authentic. Jack had coordinated with his police contacts to have undercover officers discreetly present. They knew that today was crucial, and their careful preparations were aimed at turning the tables on Richard. Meanwhile, in her room, Sarah was trying to center herself before the day began. She looked through old photographs of Matthew, her heart aching with a mixture of regret and hope. She had spent so many years hiding from the truth, and now she was about to confront it head-on. As Sarah descended the stairs, she joined Jack and Emily in the kitchen. The three of them exchanged determined glances, each of them preparing mentally for the confrontation they knew was coming. Matthew's arrival was imminent, and with it, the possibility of finally ending the threat Richard posed. The doorbell rang, breaking the stillness of the house. Jack, Emily, and Sarah exchanged looks of apprehension before heading to the foyer to greet their guest. As Sarah opened the door, she saw Matthew standing on the threshold, a man whose presence seemed to encapsulate both strength and sorrow. Matthew looked at Sarah with a mixture of familiarity and surprise. "Sarah," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "It's been too long." Sarah stepped aside to let him in, her heart pounding. "Matthew, this is Jack," she said, introducing her son with a voice tinged with nervousness. "And this is Emily, my daughter." Matthew extended his hand to Jack, who shook it firmly. "Nice to meet you, Jack." Jack studied Matthew's face, noting the familiar features that mirrored his own. The resemblance was undeniable, and seeing it in person made the connection feel more real than ever. "It's an honor to meet you," Jack said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've heard a lot about you." Matthew nodded, his eyes softening. "I've heard a lot about you, too. It's a strange and bittersweet feeling to finally meet you like this." Emily, sensing the tension, offered a warm smile. "Come on in. We've got everything set up for the exhibition. Let's get started." The group moved to the studio, where Matthew examined the paintings with expert eyes. His analysis was thorough, and his insights helped refine the plan they had devised. He reassured them that the originals were well protected and that their plan to use the decoy paintings as bait was sound. As they worked, Matthew and Sarah exchanged stories of the past, filling in gaps that had long been left open. The emotional weight of their shared history and the hope of resolving their current predicament seemed to draw them closer. By midday, the studio was ready for the private exhibition. The paintings were arranged meticulously, and the atmosphere was set to reflect the exclusivity of the event. Jack and Emily worked with Matthew to finalize the details, while Sarah made last-minute adjustments. With everything in place, all they could do was wait for Richard to arrive. As the time approached, Jack, Sarah, and Emily gathered in a quiet corner of the studio, their nerves on edge. Jack took a deep breath. "We've done everything we can. Now we just have to see it through." Sarah nodded, her expression a mix of resolve and apprehension. "We'll face this together, whatever happens." Emily gave them both a reassuring smile. "And no matter what, we'll make it through this. We're stronger than we were before." The sound of a car approaching broke the silence, signaling that Richard's arrival was imminent. The three of them exchanged a final, determined look before heading to the entrance to greet their unwelcome guest. As Richard stepped into the studio, his eyes gleamed with greed and anticipation. Little did he know that today would not go as he had planned. The confrontation was about to unfold, and with it, the chance to finally put an end to the chaos that had plagued their lives. Matthew's expression shifted from warmth to concern as he heard Richard Baker's name. He took a deep breath, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation. "Richard Baker," he said quietly. "I should have known he'd come back into our lives." Sarah, her face a mask of apprehension, moved to stand beside Matthew. "We've been trying to outmaneuver him, but we need your expertise. Richard is planning to auction off forgeries of my original works, and we're afraid he might succeed if we don't act quickly." Matthew nodded, his demeanor turning serious. "I understand. Let's go over what you've managed to set up." Jack led Matthew and Sarah to the studio, where Emily had arranged the paintings with meticulous care. Matthew examined them closely, his practiced eye taking in every detail. He paused at several pieces, his face reflecting a mixture of concern and concentration. "These are excellent forgeries," Matthew said finally. "Richard's plan to use them at the auction is both clever and dangerous. If he gets away with it, the damage could be irreparable." Sarah's eyes were filled with worry. "What can we do to stop him?" Matthew took a moment before responding. First, we need to ensure that Richard believes these paintings are the originals. We can use the exhibition as a trap, but we must be careful not to alert him to our true intentions. The key will be to make him think he's won. Emily spoke up, her voice firm with resolve. We've arranged everything for the exhibition. The paintings are ready, and we've got undercover officers on standby. But what happens if Richard doesn't take the bait? Matthew's eyes met Jack's with a steady gaze. If Richard is as desperate as you say, he'll likely take the risk. But we should be prepared for any contingencies. We'll need to act swiftly once he makes a move. Jack nodded, absorbing Matthew's words. We're counting on you to help us through this. Your knowledge could be the difference between success and failure. Matthew smiled, his expression a mix of pride and determination. I'm here to help. We'll make sure Richard Baker is brought to justice. As the final preparations for the exhibition were made, the tension in the Morgan mansion was palpable. Each member of the family had a role to play. Emily would handle the event details, Sarah would stay close to the paintings, and Jack would coordinate with the police. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 4 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. The time approached and the private exhibition began. The guests, carefully selected to ensure no one would suspect anything unusual, milled about admiring the artwork. Richard Baker arrived, his demeanor brimming with self-satisfaction as he took in the scene. Jack, Sarah, Emily, and Matthew watched from the sidelines, their eyes fixed on Richard. The tension was almost unbearable as the plan unfolded. Richard moved from painting to painting, his greed evident as he scrutinized each one. As the evening progressed, Matthew and Jack exchanged glances, silently communicating their readiness. They knew the moment was near. Richard's obsession with acquiring the paintings meant he would not back down easily. Finally, Richard approached Sarah with a sly smile. These are remarkable pieces. I'm sure they'll fetch a high price at the auction. Sarah forced a smile, her heart racing. I hope so. We've worked hard to prepare them. The interaction was tense but brief. As Richard continued to negotiate and inspect the paintings, Jack signaled to the undercover officers. They moved discreetly, positioning themselves to ensure they could act at the right moment. As the night wore on, Richard's impatience grew. He became increasingly aggressive in his attempts to secure the paintings. Just when it seemed he might make a move that would expose him, the authorities stepped in. Mr. Baker, one of the officers announced, we have a few questions regarding the authenticity of these pieces. Richard's face went pale, his confident demeanor shattering. What is this? I've done nothing wrong. Let's take this conversation elsewhere, the officer said firmly, guiding Richard away from the paintings. The tension in the room was palpable as Richard was escorted out. Jack, Emily, Sarah, and Matthew exchanged relieved glances, knowing the first part of their plan had succeeded. The aftermath of the evening was filled with a mix of exhaustion and relief. Richard's attempt to deceive the art world had been thwarted, and the Morgan family had taken a significant step towards reclaiming their lives. As the night came to a close, the family gathered together, their bond stronger than ever. The challenges they faced were far from over, but they had shown that by working together, they could confront even the most daunting threats. In the quiet aftermath, Jack, Emily, and Sarah reflected on the journey they had been through. Matthew's return had not only brought new hope but had also marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one defined by resilience, family, and a renewed sense of purpose. As the family worked late into the night, the atmosphere in the Morgan mansion was one of intense focus and nervous energy. Every detail had to be perfect to ensure that the hidden messages in Sarah's paintings would be revealed without alerting Richard Baker to their scheme. The next morning, the mansion was transformed into a high-end art gallery, complete with elegant decorations and carefully arranged exhibits. The guest list was carefully curated to include influential figures who, Matthew hoped, could sway public opinion and expose Richard's corruption. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as the time for the exhibition approached. Richard Baker arrived at the mansion with an air of smug confidence. He greeted Sarah and Jack with a practiced charm, clearly eager to see the fruits of their labor. His eyes, however, were sharp and calculating, constantly scanning the room for any sign of a trap. The exhibition began with a grand opening, and the guests marveled at the displayed artworks. Matthew's plan was in motion. As Richard moved from painting to painting, he was unwittingly following a trail of clues embedded in the art. These clues, when pieced together, would reveal the extensive network of corruption he was part of. Jack kept a close watch on Richard, his anxiety mounting with every passing minute. Emily coordinated with the security team, ensuring that every movement was recorded and every action carefully monitored. Sarah, while maintaining her composure, felt her heart racing as she saw Richard's reaction to the paintings. She knew that the success of their plan hinged on this moment. Richard's interest in the paintings seemed genuine, but Matthew noticed a subtle shift in his demeanor as he lingered near one of the most crucial pieces. "We're nearing the tipping point," Matthew whispered to Jack, his eyes fixed on Richard. "Keep an eye on him. He's about to make a move." Just as Matthew predicted, Richard's behavior became increasingly erratic. He started asking pointed questions about the origins of the paintings and their supposed authenticity. His growing agitation was noticeable to the guests, and several started to take notice. The tension in the room escalated as Richard's frustration boiled over. He began making aggressive accusations about the paintings being forgeries and demanded to speak to Sarah privately. Sarah, sensing the danger, managed to keep her cool and directed him to a quiet corner of the mansion where the security team could monitor their conversation discreetly. At that moment, Emily and Matthew took action. Matthew's allies, who had been strategically placed among the guests, began to subtly gather evidence and record conversations. The hidden messages in the paintings were now being brought to light, as key guests began to piece together the information and question Richard's involvement. As Sarah and Richard spoke in the secluded corner, Richard's desperation became evident. "I know what you're trying to do," he hissed, "but you're out of your depth. You don't understand the forces you're up against." Sarah remained calm, her voice steady. "It's not just about exposing you, Richard. It's about making sure that your actions are held accountable. The truth will come out, one way or another." Richard's face contorted with rage. "You think you can play games with me? You have no idea what I'm capable of." Before he could make another move, Matthew and Jack approached, flanked by the security team. "Richard Baker," Matthew said firmly, "you're under arrest for your involvement in a wide range of corrupt activities." The room fell into stunned silence as the security team moved in to detain Richard. The guests watched in shock as the man they had admired was taken away in handcuffs. The evidence gathered, combined with the clues hidden in the paintings, was more than enough to ensure that Richard's crimes would be thoroughly investigated. As Richard was escorted out of the mansion, Sarah, Jack, Emily, and Matthew stood together, a sense of accomplishment and relief washing over them. The exhibition had served its purpose, not only revealing Richard's corruption but also bringing him to justice. In the aftermath, the family took a moment to reflect on their journey. The danger had been immense, but their unity and determination had seen them through. The Morgan Mansion, once a symbol of fear and uncertainty, now stood as a testament to their resilience and strength. Matthew looked at his newly reunited family with pride. "You've done well. We've taken a significant step towards putting the past behind us and reclaiming our lives." Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Matthew, for everything." Jack and Emily shared a smile, their bond stronger than ever. The challenges they faced were far from over, but they had shown that together, they could overcome even the darkest of threats. As they prepared to move forward, the Morgan family knew that their future was uncertain, but they faced it with renewed hope and a deeper understanding of the strength they had found in each other. The Morgan Mansion, now eerily quiet after the chaos of the night, seemed to hold its breath as the Morgan Davis family awaited Matthew's return. The once vibrant and bustling gallery was now a stark contrast, littered with the remnants of what had been a high-profile art exhibition. The painting, which had been stolen but was now safely recovered, lay on the desk, its significance weighing heavily in the room. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she clutched the old photograph. Her eyes were distant, reflecting a tumultuous mix of emotions. Jack and Emily sat beside her, their expressions a blend of worry and curiosity, eager to understand the full extent of the revelations that had unfolded. "Mom," Jack said softly, breaking the silence. "What's in that photograph? Why does it matter so much?" Sarah took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "That photo, it's from a time before everything went wrong. The person with their face burned out. That was someone very important to us. It was my brother, Nathan." Jack's eyes widened in shock. "Your brother? But I thought—" Sarah nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Nathan was involved in something dangerous. He was part of Richard's network, but he tried to back out. He wanted to expose the corruption and make things right. But Richard, he couldn't let that happen." Emily leaned in, her voice steady but concerned. "So Nathan was the fourth person in that photo. What happened to him?" Sarah's voice cracked as she spoke. "Nathan was killed. It was made to look like an accident, but it was no accident. Richard wanted to silence him because Nathan knew too much. He was trying to bring down the entire network from within." Jack's expression hardened with anger and resolve. "That's why Richard has been so relentless. He's trying to protect the lies and cover up his past." Sarah nodded, wiping away her tears. "Yes, and now it's all coming to light. The photograph, the missing painting, everything is connected. Richard planned to use the chaos of the exhibition to cover his tracks and ensure that the truth about Nathan and his involvement remained hidden." Emily placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "But you and Matthew have done everything you could. Richard is on the run, and the stolen painting is back. We have evidence now, and we need to use it to uncover the full extent of his corruption." Sarah took a deep breath, a new sense of determination settling over her. "We need to expose everything. Nathan's death was a tragedy that can no longer be ignored. The painting contains critical information, and we need to ensure that it is used to bring Richard and his network to justice." As if on cue, Matthew burst into the room, his face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "I've managed to get Richard into custody. The police will take it from here, but we need to act quickly." Jack and Emily exchanged looks of relief. "The painting," Jack said, pointing to the desk. "It contains the key to everything. We need to get it to the authorities and make sure it's used to expose the entire network." Matthew nodded, his expression resolute. "Yes, and we need to prepare ourselves for the fallout. The truth about Nathan's death, and everything else Richard has hidden, will likely cause a storm, but we have to face it head-on." If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 5 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. The family gathered around the painting, their resolve strengthened by the weight of the truth. They knew that the coming days would be challenging as they worked to unravel the full extent of Richard's corruption and bring justice to Nathan. As they prepared to take the next steps, they were united in their mission to honor Nathan's memory and to ensure that his story and the truth would no longer be buried under layers of deceit and betrayal. The night's events had set in motion a series of revelations that would forever change the Morgan Davis family, and the fight for justice was only just beginning. The sound of the front door opening startled them. Matthew entered the study, his face a mixture of triumph and concern. "Richard is in custody," he announced. "The police are interrogating him now." A collective sigh of relief filled the room, but the tension remained palpable. Everyone knew there were still deeper truths to be uncovered. Jack was the first to break the silence. "Mom," he said softly but firmly, "you said there was something we needed to know, something that changes everything." Sarah nodded, her gaze meeting Matthew's. Their silent communication spoke volumes, revealing years of shared secrets and unspoken understanding. "It's time," Matthew said gently. 30 years have passed. It's time for the truth to come to light." Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes clouded with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "It all started 3 decades ago when we were young and ambitious. Matthew, Richard, me, and Anthony. At the mention of Anthony, She pointed to the figure with the burned-out face in the photograph. Anthony was the fourth member of our group, a brilliant artist with a vision that went beyond conventional art. He proposed we use our talents for something more lucrative. Matthew continued, Anthony's idea was to create perfect replicas of famous artworks, not to sell them as forgeries, but to replace the originals in museums and private collections. It was a daring and risky plan, but at the time it seemed exhilarating. Our replicas were flawless, indistinguishable from the originals. We quickly gained notoriety in the art underworld. But then, Sarah's voice wavered, and Matthew took her hand, offering silent support. We discovered that Anthony wasn't just replacing artworks. He was selling the originals to unscrupulous buyers, collectors willing to pay fortunes for stolen masterpieces. Jack and Emily listened in stunned silence, struggling to grasp the enormity of the revelation. When we confronted Anthony, Matthew continued, things spiraled out of control. There was a violent confrontation, and in the chaos, I killed him. Sarah's tears flowed freely now. It was an accident, but the blood on my hands was a constant reminder of what we had done. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of the revelations. Jack and Emily looked at their parents, their perceptions of them shattered by this new information. Richard was there, Matthew added, and he helped us cover up the incident. From that moment on, our lives were forever changed. We were consumed by guilt, and the weight of our actions drove a wedge between us. I discovered that Sarah was pregnant shortly after Nathan's death, he said, glancing at Jack. We decided to separate from the Morgans, who were our close friends, and offered Jack up for adoption to protect him from the fallout. Jack stood up abruptly, his mind racing. But why did Richard turn against you? Sarah's face was etched with pain. Richard never forgave us. His guilt turned into resentment, and he began blackmailing us, threatening to reveal the truth if we didn't cooperate with his new schemes. But that's not all, Matthew added, his voice heavy with regret. A few years ago, we discovered something else that Richard knew and used as his ultimate leverage. Sarah turned to Emily, her eyes filled with a mix of love and anguish. Emily, honey, Anthony was your biological father. Emily's eyes widened in shock. What? But how? Sarah nodded, her voice trembling. Anthony and I had a brief relationship before everything went awry. When I discovered I was pregnant shortly after his death, I didn't know how to handle it. I decided to raise you as my daughter, keeping the truth about your father hidden. The room fell into a heavy silence, laden with newly exposed truths and unspoken emotions. Jack and Emily exchanged glances, their bond now defined by a shared history of secrets and sacrifices. Suddenly, sirens wailed outside, and police lights illuminated the mansion's windows. Matthew's face went pale. The police are here, and Richard is with them. Moments later, the study door burst open. Richard entered, flanked by two police officers. His expression was a mixture of triumph and resignation. Ah, the family reunited, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. How touching. The lead detective stepped forward. Mr. Morgan, Mrs. Davis, Mr. Davis, you're all under arrest for conspiracy, art fraud, and obstruction of justice in a homicide case. As the officers began reading their rights, Richard approached Sarah. I'm sorry, darling, he said quietly, but if I fall, we all fall. It's time for the truth to come out. The whole truth. Jack and Emily watched helplessly as their parents were handcuffed. Everything they had fought for, everything they had built, seemed to be unraveling before their eyes. But then, amidst the chaos, Jack noticed a glint of understanding in Matthew's eyes. A subtle, almost imperceptible signal that this was all part of a larger plan. As they were led out of the mansion, Jack leaned in and whispered to Emily, "Trust me, this isn't over." In the days that followed, New York City was rocked by a scandal that dominated the headlines. The truth about the art forgery network, the corrupt politicians involved, and the murder of Anthony was exposed. The public was divided. Some saw Sarah, Matthew, and Richard as criminals deserving punishment, while others viewed them as victims of their circumstances, who had ultimately sought redemption. The Morgan Davis family's journey had reached a turning point, and the consequences of their actions were now unfolding in the harsh light of day. But as the story continued to unravel, it was clear that the legacy of their choices and the quest for truth was far from over. Meanwhile, Jack and Emily worked tirelessly behind the scenes, leveraging connections from the exhibition, decoding hidden messages in the paintings, and utilizing the evidence Matthew had painstakingly gathered over the years. They built a network of support that became crucial as the trial unfolded into a media spectacle. Each testimony, each piece of evidence, peeled back layers of the story, revealing a nuanced narrative not of black and white, but of complex grays, difficult decisions, and unforeseen consequences. After weeks of testimonies and intense deliberations, the verdict was finally announced. Sarah, Matthew, and Richard were found guilty of art fraud. However, due to their cooperation in dismantling the broader corruption network and their acknowledgement of their wrongdoings, they received reduced sentences. The judge, in his final statement, remarked, "This case serves as a reminder that art, much like life, is not a simple matter of good and evil. It mirrors our highest aspirations and our deepest mistakes. The true masterpiece lies in how we choose to redeem those mistakes." Months later, a new chapter began with the inauguration of an exhibition titled Redemption, The Art of Truth, at a modest gallery on the outskirts of New York City. Jack and Emily stood nervously in front of the entrance, resolute in their mission. The gallery showcased works by Sarah and Matthew, and even some recovered pieces by Anthony. Each painting was more than just art. It was a confession and a plea for forgiveness. Among the guests were familiar faces: journalists who had covered the trial, politicians seeking redemption, and influential figures from the art world moved by the story. At the heart of the gathering stood Sarah and Matthew, recently released with electronic ankle bracelets, but visibly unburdened. Their faces reflected both the gravity of their past and a newfound clarity, the light of truth unveiled, of secrets laid bare. Richard was also present, positioned away from the crowd. His role in exposing the complete truth had earned him some leniency, but his path to redemption was set to be longer and more solitary. Jack took a deep breath and, with Emily by his side, tapped a glass to draw attention. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "This exhibition is more than a display of art. It's a testament to truth, however painful it may be. It's about confronting our mistakes and learning from them, about family in all its intricate and beautiful forms." His gaze swept over Sarah and Matthew, then to Emily, and finally to Anthony's portrait that dominated the gallery. "We are shaped by the choices of those who came before us, but also by our own decisions. This is our story, full of shadows and light, and we are here together to pen the next chapter." As the night progressed, the gallery buzzed with conversation, laughter, and occasionally tears. It became a space for healing, understanding, and hope. In a quiet corner, Sarah and Matthew observed their children engaging with the guests, children who had grown up under the weight of secrets they never fully understood. Now, they stood united and resilient, ready to face the future with courage. Sarah turned to Matthew, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you think they'll ever forgive us completely?" Matthew took her hand, their fingers intertwining. "I believe they already have, and perhaps with time we'll learn to forgive ourselves." As the evening wound down and the final guests departed, the family gathered in front of Anthony's portrait. It was a moment of closure, a chance to acknowledge a past they couldn't alter, but from which they could draw lessons. Jack looked at his unconventional family, bound by art, secrets, and now, the truth. "You know what?" he said with a hopeful smile. "I think this could be our masterpiece." Under the soft glow of the gallery lights, surrounded by art that told their story, the Morgan Davis family prepared to paint a new canvas, one brimming with second chances, renewed love, and the promise of a future where truth, however challenging, would always have a place in the tapestry of their lives. As we close this chapter of our story, we've witnessed a complex journey of truth, redemption, and transformation. From the high-stakes world of art forgery to the profound revelations of family secrets, we've seen how our choices shape our lives and the lives of those around us. We hope this story has given you new perspectives on forgiveness, the pursuit of truth, and the power of redemption. What have you learned from this narrative? How will you apply these insights to your own life? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us one key lesson you've taken away and how you plan to incorporate it into your life. Your reflections not only enrich our community but also inspire others. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue to bring meaningful stories and discussions to our audience. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing more with you soon.